Okay, guys, we're starting a new SOL, CE5. CE5 deals with voting, politics, and political parties. So we're going to concentrate right now on just voting. And voting is definitely a right that you have as a citizen of the United States, but it's also a responsibility. Honestly, we can't be a democracy if we don't have a situation where people are able to vote and where people actually do vote. So it's really a right and a responsibility, something that everyone should do. It's not required. Nobody will go to jail if you don't vote, but it is a responsibility, and a responsibility is something that you should do. So let's talk a little bit more about voting. Okay, first off, the qualifications. Understand we said that you had to be a citizen. So that means immigrants who come into our country who have not become U.S. citizens absolutely cannot vote. Sometimes people do not really understand that, but you have to be a citizen of the United States in order to vote. You've got to be 18 years old by the day of the election. So even if you're 17, you can register as long as you're going to be 18 on election day. You do have to be a U.S. citizen. Now, there are two ways you can be a U.S. citizen. You can be a U.S. citizen because you were born in the United States. You can also become a U.S. citizen by going through the naturalization process. And we haven't really talked about that yet, but we're going to really soon. So you do have to be a U.S. citizen. Please understand that people who enter the country illegally cannot vote. Immigrants do not vote. You have to become a U.S. citizen. And you have to be a resident of the state. Like, for example, I live in Tennessee, so no, I can't vote in Virginia. You have to be a resident of that state. Got to be mentally competent. If you've ever been ruled as mentally incompetent, then a judge will have to rule on it and decide that you are able to vote. You cannot be a convicted felon. If you have committed a crime and gone to trial and been found guilty of a felony, then you've lost your right to vote. You can regain that right to vote, though. In Virginia especially, you have to go through a process. All right, so voter registration. How is it that you get registered to vote? Well, you have to register at least 22 days before the election. 22, 22 days before the election, you must be registered. So if an election, let's say, just making up, is on October 22nd, you've got to be registered before October 1st. There's an example. 22 days. So how can you register? Well, there are three main ways to register. You can register by going in person to the registrar's office, and I'm going to show you who the Bristol, Virginia registrar is here in just a minute, and I'm going to show you where that office is located. But you can go in person and register to vote. You can also register to vote online. That's sort of a new way that you can do that, but that is available, and it's not a difficult process. You can go online and register to vote. And you can also mail it in, pick up an application like at the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, or at a public library or a state or local government office. You get the application there, and then you fill it out, and you can mail it in. So there are only three ways that you can register to vote. You can go in person to the registrar's office, you can mail it in, or online. You can actually fill out the application online. The three ways to register: in person, online, mail it in. Those are the only three ways. And you have to go to the registrar's office or mail it to the registrar's office. All right. Whoops, I went too fast. This is Penny Lindbergh. Penny Lindbergh is our voter registrar for Bristol, Virginia, and her office is located in City Hall. And City Hall is, honestly, it's close enough to the school that we could just about walk there. It is very close to the school board office. It's right down the street from the school board office. So it's very, very close. And this is a picture of Penny right up here putting out a sign on an election day one year. But this is where you would go to register, or you could get online to register, or you could get an application, fill it out, and mail it to her office here in City Hall. Three ways you can register to vote. And you do have to be registered, or you cannot vote. You have to register. So let's talk about who is more likely to register to vote and to actually go vote, who is less likely to register and go actually vote. There are several different types of of elections. You've got the presidential election, which, we've got one coming up in 2020. You also have elections that are for our members of Congress, Senate, House of Representatives. Then you've got state elections for our governor, for our House of Delegates, for our state Senate. And then you've got local elections to elect the school board members and to elect our city council. So remember, our country's made up like a cake of layers. Don't forget that. We got layers of government. Your main two layers are national and state, and each layer has a set of elections. Which one is it that people are most likely to actually get their butt out and go and vote? Presidential. People will go and vote in presidential elections more than they will state elections. People will vote in state elections more than they will local elections. Who knows why? Maybe it's because they hear about it more on TV and therefore they think it's more important. But here's the truth, guys. All elections are important because you're electing people to run your governments, whether it be national, state, or local. And if there's one thing you get from my class, it is the importance of voting. It is your voice. So, no matter which elections we're talking about, which people are more likely to vote? Well, they're more likely to vote the older they are. So, the younger you are, the less likely you are to vote. Unfortunately, 18 to 25-year-olds is the age group that has the least voter participation, the ones that just won't go out and vote. The ones most likely to vote are the ones who are older. So, you lose your voice if you don't vote, and especially collectively as a group. So, I hope you guys change this, but younger people are less likely to vote. The older you are, more likely to vote. The more education you have, the more likely you are to vote. So if you graduate from high school, you're more likely to vote than someone who's dropped out of high school. People who have gone and added to their education, whether they're going to a trade school, vocational school, or going to college, tend to be more likely to vote than someone who's only graduated from high school. So as you see, the more education you get, it seems the more likely a person is to vote. And the more income a person makes, the more likely they are to vote. So the lower your income is, it seems to be those people are less likely to vote. For example, the wealthy tend to vote more than people who live in poverty. And it's a shame because you have to remember you're electing people to represent you. So if wealthy people tend to vote more, then they're going to elect people that will represent them better. That means people living in poverty don't get the same kind of representation. So I'm trying to get across to you how important it is to vote. If you don't vote, then politicians don't listen to you. And I mean that collectively as a group, whether it mean collectively as a group that lives in poverty or middle class, or collectively as a group who has lower education or higher education, or collectively as a younger group or an older group. So these are very important factors. Please vote when you get a chance. So why do people not vote? Here are the reasons that they give. One, sometimes they just don't care. I mean, the word I use for this is apathy. A-P-A-T-H-Y. Apathy literally means you just don't care. And people just don't care. They lack interest in the candidates. They lack interest in the issues. They don't care. And it's sad because that means when you don't care, you've lost your voice and no one is going to help take care of what you want for your government. Sometimes people forget to register. They fail to register, and if you don't register, you can't vote. So you got to register. Many times people believe that their vote isn't important, that it doesn't count, or they say they're too busy. Maybe it would be better if we would have election day instead of on a Tuesday, which it almost always is. Maybe it'd be better to have it on a Saturday or a Sunday when more people are off from work. I don't know. That's a conversation that we need to have as a class. What kinds of things might improve voter turnout, voter participation? So participation is least likely or less likely the younger a person is, the lower the education, and the lower the income. Now understand there are always exceptions to all three of these. What we're doing here is just looking at the tendency nationwide, which people are more likely to vote, which people are less likely to vote. And these tend to be the reasons why people do or don't vote. So the main ideas. Only citizens who register may participate in any type of election, period. And please know, every vote is important and doesn't count. So there'll be a time when you'll have a chance to vote and you'll think, well, my vote's not important. I want you to think about something. If everyone feels that way, then no one votes. And are we really then a democracy? Something to think about. How can you participate in the democratic process? Well, you can actually volunteer and help in campaigns. You can participate in classroom simulations that we will try to have in our class, online simulations. But the most important thing is to just build that interest now so that someday you actually do vote. So, legislation and constitutional amendments that deal with voting. So these are the amendments that we've talked about already some, but they all deal with voting. The first one here, provided the right to vote for free slaves, that's going to be Amendment 15. Amendment 15 provided former slaves the right to vote. The amendment that gave women the right to vote, Amendment 19, which was passed in 1920. So in 2020, it'll be 100 years, only 100 years, gals, that women have had the right to vote. The amendment that gave Washington, D.C. 3 electoral votes, that is Amendment 23. And what I like to do is to help students learn this by saying 3 electoral votes, 23, 3 electoral votes, 23, 23rd Amendment. The amendment that made the poll tax illegal, which is a tax that you'd have to pay in order to vote, that amendment is number 24. The amendment that lowered the voting age to 18, lowered it from 21 to 18, is Amendment 26. And then there is legislation that we need to know too that increased the right to vote by making the literacy test illegal. There was a time when you'd have to be able to pass a literacy test in order to be able to vote. This law made it illegal, and it also says that if someone tries to vote who cannot speak English, then a non-English ballot and instructions must be provided. And this law is known as the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Voting Rights Act of 1965. Okay, we're going to stop right there with this first part.